The first round of bashing went a lot better than I expected. I stretched this area, and as I did that, wrinkles formed along the outside, which I then trapped in the stump. I can feel the panel rubbing in here. I got some scratches right in there, so that needs to be raised. So I'll do that, and then I'll reassess. I could see needing some more shrinks up along in those front corners too. I stretched this area where I saw the scratches on the back side of the panel. Stretched this some more up here so that it's sitting down against the model, but I stopped because I wanted to point out how there's this band. You can almost see where the stretching stops, and we've just got this band of what looks like extra material. That it's just the easiest way to get rid of that is by gathering it up, making it shorter and thicker. In other words, shrinking it, as opposed to trying to stretch everything else more in comparison to this. And so I think I'll do at least one, maybe two shrinks per side to draw up that extra material along the bottom. I hammered the spots that it felt like the panel was still rubbing on against the model, and then I still have a gap along this front area. I'm going to anneal this area and do some more shrinks in here, and hopefully that ought to get it pretty close. As expected, all of that shrinking was pretty brutal on the surface. The piece is about as ugly as a mud fence, but it fits the model, and I think with some planishing it will look okay. The reason that I made this in one piece rather than two was it's really important to me to make this without requiring any welding, since that's a big hurdle for people who are just learning to do this and don't have many tools. And so I didn't want to have too many seams that would require riveting. So this is the way I did it. We'll see how it turns out. After some planishing, I'm ready to make the other side piece, and then we'll rivet this together. One aspect of this project that I'm not overly happy with is the marking left in the panel from the tuck shrinking that I did, which I knew that would happen, but I figured it was worth it for the speed that you can shrink. I may have had my one good idea for the year. I'm going to take an air chisel, and this is not a particularly expensive one or anything like that, and I just put a flat steel hammer into it, and I'm going to try to planish this a little bit better against the stake, since you'll most likely need some kind of air tool to set your rivets. I figure I'm not completely cheating. I'll show you how to do the rivets by hand if you have to, but let's just give this a shot, see how it works. With the individual panels adequately planished for me, I've got them in place on the fiberglass model. I've got them clamped in their original places where I had them fitting the whole time. I've drilled through the aluminum and the fiberglass model, and I've secured the panels in their original locations with spring-loaded clecos. These are temporary rivets. They come in several different sizes. They are color coordinated by size. This happens to be a 5/32 because those were the rivets that I have left over from another project that I'm going to use to rivet these panels together. I'm going to mark where my seams are going to be. I need to put a joggle in the bottom panel, which means it's just a little step in the panel so that when I rivet these two together, it will cinch down tightly and look a lot nicer than if I just have them overlapped and have a gap in there. So I'll do that here. There'll be another seam at the bottom and then two just like them on the far side. To install the joggle, I'm going super low buck. If you have a bead roller, even the world's least expensive bead roller will do a fine job for the joggle part of this. But if you don't have a bead roller, here's how you could do it if you don't mind sacrificing a pair of vice grips. This, as you can see, is a modified pair of vice grips. I just took some mild steel and made a set of dies, for lack of a better term, with a little guide on the back so that when I insert the metal between the jaws that it will go to the same depth each time. And I like to put it tighter than it really closes all the way. To get the best results, it seems like if you do one kind of light pass to clarify where you're going and then make another pass where you're deepening that joggle, that seems to do a better job. Definitely low buck. However, it will do an acceptable job if you just take a little bit of time to make sure you're overlapping each time you squeeze the tool. Just make sure you're overlapping. If you had to, you can come back and clean it up against the edge of a dolly or steel stake. I would only hit it from the back. I would not hit it from the what will be the exterior side on the finished piece, because that will leave hammer marks. That's working all right. And let's see. So That's the joggle I'm talking about right there. So the one panel will lie on this side and get riveted through this surface here. And the virtue of the joggle is that then the panels are more or less in the same plane on the finished piece. So here's the first joggle I did with the vice grips. Looks all right, although I did make one pretty stupid rookie mistake. Of course, your tool is following your edge. So if your edge is not perfectly straight, then consequently your bead will also not be straight. And so right in this area, it just seems like I've got a little bit of a waver in there that I shouldn't have, and I was just being stupid. So you'll do better. To figure out where the grill is supposed to go, I'm going to take one panel at a time and use the grill that I have. I don't know that we'll end up using this or what exactly I'll do with this, but this is symmetrical, a good place to start. I'm just one at a time taking these panels and then placing the grill where I think it's supposed to go based on the indentation that is in the Bondo on the front of the model, and then I'll just trace that location. It gets reasonably close. If it's going to be mounted on a hot rod and you're moving fast, maybe a little inaccuracy won't be noticed. We'll go with that. But one panel at a time, because then I can rely on the rest of the model to get a reasonably good fit for the one panel I'm trying to mark. Here's a view of the bottom of the track nose. This would be the right side. As I'm marking the area for the joggle that will receive the grill, there are places where two panels will overlap. The anticipated rivet seam is along this line, for example. So in the areas where these two are going to overlap, because this is a joggle and this is a joggle, that technically would have to be yet another step deeper. And I think what I'll do is just cut out a little section where they overlap so that I'll be able to get a much cleaner transition, since I want that grill to be able to sit down in there pretty flat. Just to review, I used the modified vice grips to put the flange around the grill opening and down both sides where the rivet seams are going to go. It was a ton of work. There is also, along the rear edge, another joggle where the hood overlaps the back of the track nose. I think that's pretty standard on this type of piece. A bead roller would make short work of that joggle, as it would these other joggles. If you do not have a bead roller, let me show you another way you could do this. It would require making your own simple jig called a hammer form, where you create a step that imitates what you're trying to end up with. Here I have a couple of pieces of leaf spring. Then you would anneal the edge of your piece of metal where you want that joggle to happen. You clamp the metal really securely, and then you hammer that detail into the panel without the panel shifting. It'll take me a moment to get this set up, but I'll show you how the hammer form method would work in this application. If you decide to go with the hammer form route, the item that you hammer against doesn't necessarily need to be steel. I just used a leaf spring because that's what I had in the garage. You could use plywood. The tools that you hammer with, if you have hardwood, that would be ideal. Hard plastic, brass, aluminum, anything will work. The softer tools are going to be better just because they will mark up the piece less. I used a steel hammer there at the end to just speed it along quicker. But the tools that you make yourself will typically work the best, and you'd be surprised at the quality you can get with this kind of setup, although it will take you a little bit to get everything made the way you want it.